Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's virtual speaker session. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. I'll give folks a couple moments to grab their lunch and settle in. Today we are joined by, or will be joined by Professor Jared Frederick, Professor of History at Penn State Altoona. So appreciate everyone's patience and appreciate everyone joining us today, and we'll get started here in just a few moments. Once again, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Virtual speaker session will begin here in a few moments. This is a regular series that connects you to our faculty superstars at Penn State across the Commonwealth. We're just going to give folks another minute or two to grab their lunch and settle in and get comfortable, and then we'll get started here shortly. So good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started here with today's virtual speaker session. I appreciate everyone joining us today. This is a regular session and series that connects Penn Staters to our faculty superstars here at Penn State, at University Park, and across the Commonwealth. And that's a good example for today. Before we get into the details of today's discussion, just want to share a couple housekeeping items. Live closed captions are available for you today. You can access them by clicking the closed caption button at the bottom of the Zoom video window, and then by clicking Show Subtitle. You can also customize your caption view by clicking on the stream text link posted in the chat. And we're also live streaming today's presentation, which will be archived and available on our website. So obviously you're tuned in to the live stream. You'll be able to ask our host and guest questions today, and then we'll also be sharing this afterwards. So if you have friends or family members or fellow alumni who wanted to tune in today, but their schedule got in the way, you can share this with them afterward. You're also encouraged to share questions in the Q&A section. Professor Frederick will be going over the discussion today, and he's encouraging you to ask questions, as are we, and we can go over those questions after the presentation for today. And then turning our attention to today's research topic, this afternoon we are joined by World War II expert Dr. Jared Frederick. Dr. Frederick is an associate teaching professor of history at Penn State Altoona. He will discuss a new tour coming up in 2027 that is inspired by the epic stories of Masters of the Air. This afternoon, you're going to learn about the forthcoming World War II travel experience focused on the U.S. 8th Air Force, otherwise known as the Mighty 8th, in East Anglia. Professor Frederick will detail the immersive itinerary, including privileged behind-the-scenes access to preserved airfields like Thorpe Abbotts and Duxford, vital to the 100th Bomb Group, and so many others. You'll also discover how this tour connects you directly with the history and the sacrifices of the American bomber boys. And this conversation will include discussion on Professor Frederick's research and expertise that he will bring to this adventure. We were talking with Professor Frederick before we went live here, very much in tune with this subject and very much an expert. He's also very passionate and enthusiastic about discussing his knowledge of this topic, and so we appreciate you tuning in today. Just a little bit more info on our guest, Professor Frederick, lifelong passion for American history. Prior to his current position as an associate teaching professor of history at Penn State Altoona, Dr. Frederick served as a park ranger at Gettysburg National Military Park and Harpers Ferry National Historical Park. He is also the author of several books, including Dispatches of D-Day, Hang Tough, and Fierce Valor. And his latest book, Into the Cold, he co-authored with a 101-year-old World War II pilot. Also notably for us at the Alumni Association, Dr. Frederick hosted an overseas World War II trip in 2023, And as we mentioned at the top, he will host another one for us in May 2027. We'll ask Professor Frederick about those trips in the Q&A session after his presentation. So stick around for that. You can also see more information on today's guest in the chat area, and that will be provided by our producer, Carrie Conlin. And with that said, welcome Professor Jared Frederick to today's presentation. We are so thrilled to have you, sir, and thank you for your time and your expertise.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm glad to be here with the Penn State Alumni Association as we talk about another overseas adventure. I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint presentation now that will guide us through this forthcoming adventure that we have planned up. And so I have no doubt that several of you who are viewing the presentation with us today had the opportunity to see the Apple TV series that aired last year entitled Masters of the Air. So this is a nine-part series that chronicles the 100th Bomb Group and many of its members and their travails across many dangerous missions and exploits over battlefront Europe. The series is based on the book by historian Donald Miller, and certainly I can recommend a lot of other fine books for you to check out in regard to this subject matter. Before you go any further or proceed any additional measures in regard to this trip, the series is a really good primer because I think it captures the essence of a lot of the components in day-to-day life of what it was like to be an American airman stationed in England, flying over the North Sea or the English Channel and embarking upon these many dangerous missions. This is among several previous trips that the Penn State Alumni Association has facilitated with the National World War II Museum out of New Orleans. Likewise, a place for you to check out in some of your forthcoming adventures. But I'm really excited about this one because this is the first time that we have offered the Masters of the Air Tour specifically. And I will be your guest host on this trip, and it will be taking place, as we can see here, May 14th to the 22nd of 2027. And I will be introducing you shortly to several of the places that we will be visiting that I've had the pleasure of exploring already. And so I hope to offer some personal anecdotes as we move along. Before we do that, though, I will give a quick plug to the tour that is coming up in the meantime, and that is this May, in May of 2026. And that is the Band of Brothers tour, Easy Company to the Eagle's Nest, which will likewise be taking place in mid-May. And this is a wonderful group photo from our previous trip with several Penn State alum and friends. This was in June and July of 2023. And this is the Sherman tank that sits in the town square of Bastogne. And so I kid you not, this was one of the best trips that I ever took, and all of my friends who accompanied me would readily attest to that likewise. It's an incredibly immersive opportunity that goes from the famous training grounds that these paratroopers had in the United Kingdom. And let's see, we went all the way from England across the English Channel, explored Normandy, moved to Eastern France, visited the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, and Austria. And so this was a 2-week pilgrimage, and it was a fantastic time. And if you have the opportunity to do this tour as well, you will not be disappointed. And I will once again readily attest to all of that. So keep that trip on your radar as well, May of 2026. But let's get to the core of the matter today, and let's take a look at some of what we have lined up for May of 2027. Our Masters of the Air trip is very multifaceted, and it looks at several angles, not only of the air war, but that of the experience of the United Kingdom during the Second World War. And something that is very apparent when you go and visit many of these quaint English cities and towns is that all of them were affected by the hard hand of war in very profound ways. And it's very unlike the American experience during World War II because not a single American city was bombed during that time period. Americans were never in widespread danger in any real form on a massive level as those intrepid civilians and service members of the United Kingdom were. And on the very first day of exploring, we're going to get a sense of that up close and personal when we go and visit Cambridge. And Cambridge is a postcard picture-worthy town of the highest order. It will seem like something out of a Harry Potter movie. Beautiful old public buildings, lots of pubs, lots of quaint shops. You'll have time to explore several of those venues on your own, and we will also be doing a guided tour. And I'd like to draw your attention to the historical photograph that you see here on the right, because I think it well encapsulates how Americans were interacting with this environment. Those in the UK still refer to that influx of American service members as the friendly invasion. And it led to all sorts of interesting, colorful, poignant, sometimes comedic interactions between these two societies that were, as they joked, separated by a common language. And so it was a very interesting dynamic, historically speaking, to see these former enemies, the Brits and the Americans, learning to get along. And it led to some really revealing partnerships, friendships, and sometimes friction that were very emblematic of the alliance during the Second World War. So we'll be getting a dose of British culture and also how it interacted with American culture and expectations during the Second World War. Right outside of historic Cambridge is one of the most powerful of sites that we will visit during our tour, and that being the Cambridge American Cemetery. This was established initially as a temporary burial ground for American service members who were killed in the war. Most of them being members of the 8th or Ninth Air Forces, and also in some instances, members of the United States Navy who were killed in combat or accidents in the North Sea or the English Channel. After the war comes to a conclusion, this becomes a more permanent, formal burial ground for American service members. And there are approximately 4,000 young men and a number of women as well who are buried here. And then there are another 5,000 who are memorialized on the walls of the missing. And that is very unique and very specific to the airman experience during the Second World War because so many of these men went missing over the sea or went missing over enemy territory, and their remains could never be recovered. And the vast majority of those individuals on the walls of the missing remain missing in action to this very day. But for any of you who have ever had the chance to visit an overseas American cemetery, these are administered by the American Battle Monuments Commission, which oversee cemeteries ranging from the Philippines to Hawaii to Mexico City to all throughout Western Europe, encompassing World War I and World War II and other conflicts as well. And one of the things that will be most striking to you when we go and visit this place is that it is manicured as if it is a five-star golf resort. There is no expense or effort spared in keeping these cemeteries as beautiful and as well cultivated as is humanly possible. And it is something that will definitely leave a mark on you and will be seared into your memories. These are incredibly emotional places to visit. And when we go and check out these places in person, I hope to introduce you to some of the stories of members of the 8th and Ninth Air Force who are buried there in eternal repose. So, a very swift realization of reality here as we get started off on our tour. A place that is not too terribly far away, that is one of the best air museums that you'll find in the world, is the Duxford Air Museum. And one of the core areas of focus that this museum has is its focus on the Battle of Britain. And that will be a repetitive theme in several of the museums and the airfields that we visit on the Masters of the Air tour. Here you can see me in front of a parked Spitfire, which is in many ways, I feel, the universal symbol of British resilience associated with the Battle of Britain. And this is just an incredible sight. There are large hangars, uh, office buildings, and outbuildings associated with the Royal Air Force at this time. There's a very interactive and theatrical multimedia presentation that puts you in the control room of this base during the Battle of Britain as the Spitfires are being scrambled, as their engines are firing up, as other bases are coming under attack. It's a wonderful experience. And one of the other really incredible elements at Duxford, and I think it goes a long way in illustrating that friendly invasion dynamic that I spoke about earlier, is that there is a whole building that is entitled the American Air Museum at this otherwise very British historic site. And so it really speaks to the appreciation that the Brits still have about that, what becomes known as the special relationship over the years. And you'll be able to see some really rare American aircraft from the Second World War there and beyond. And this includes P-51s, P-47 Thunderbolts, a B-17, a B-24. These are really big and impressive aircraft that are iconic to the World War II area. And you'll be able to see all of these up close and personal as we tour Duxford. But that's not the only thing that we will be seeing at Duxford. One of the specialty treats that is exclusive to the Masters of the Air Tour is the History in Flight experience. And so what that entails is that they are going to get some of their expert pilots who work at Duxford, and they're going to fire up the engines, and they're going to roll out some Spitfires and a German aircraft, and they will essentially reenact a portion of the Battle of Britain, showing you various dogfight maneuvers. This is something very unique that you can't see at almost any other time when you go and visit Duxford. They do have a major air show that is a real delight every year, but this sort of specific personalized programming is something that is almost entirely exclusive to the tour that we will be attending in May 2027. So if you want to hear the roar of a Spitfire, now is your chance to do so. One of the other core elements is to walk in the footsteps of those who are depicted in the series Masters of the Air. And naturally, the ideal spot to do so is Thorpe Abbotts, which is the 100th Bomb Group Memorial Museum. And here you can see me inside of the existing control tower. And so out in what is now these vast pastures here in the background, that is where the airstrips were. And that is where all of these outbuildings and all the massive apparatus and logistics necessary to keep these small militarized cities afloat. And the scope of it all is really pressed upon you when you go and visit these sites because every B-17 had a 10-man crew. It would often take dozens of people to keep one of those individual aircraft in operational condition. And so many of these bases consisted of hundreds of buildings with thousands of people. And today, by and large, you kind of get these ghostly impressions of this major military colony that was once here. But it's the stories that really resonate at these places. And the Thorpe Abbotts Museum is just really incredible. And to be able to ascend the staircase of this control tower to look out onto the field, close your eyes, and imagine what transpired there 80 plus years ago is truly something to behold. And one of the things that is really striking in my mind about these various airfield museums that are located throughout East Anglia is that almost all of them are run by volunteers. These are people who do not do it for pay. They do it because they care. And they do it because there was this passion and appreciation that was instilled in them by their parents and their grandparents, some of whom went through the Second World War themselves. And so I would say that's another one of the really unique elements is you get this whole other perspective of the Second World War. Um, us being Americans and most World War II movies being depicted through the American eyes, it tends to give us an American-centric perspective. And when you go and visit these places, it really instills a sense of empathy and also a sense of appreciation for our allies and the importance of maintaining those allies over the years. And so a really good example of that is the Parham Airfield Museum, which was the home of the 390th Bomb Group. And here too, we have an excellent restoration of a control tower. But this place is unique because it also looks at various elements of Allied resistance in Europe and how the British collaborated with the French prior to D-Day and how it facilitated the various efforts of the French underground as the Normandy campaign was underway. So here too, another very multifaceted interpretation of not only the American experience, but how our allies interacted with each other as well. And in the photograph at right, you can get a sense of some of the things that are on display at these museums. And Parham was particularly interesting because there's a whole wing that is just dedicated to recovered aircraft pieces. And so here you can see the wings and the various mechanics of B-17s and B-24s that were recovered in the vicinity. And I'm 6'3", and you can really get a sense of scale as I am standing next to these things. Perhaps my favorite spot, and that says a lot because it's a hard choice, is the home of the 95th Bomb Group Museum. And this is at a little English village known as Horham. And the reason why this was perhaps my favorite destination in my previous journey, chronicling the airman experience during the Second World War, is that it is so thoroughly transformed back to its 1940s appearance. And I'm glad to say that when we go visit there, there will be a live musical performance in the original Officers Club. And so you'll have a really swinging good time when you go and visit this place. And you'll be able to sit and enjoy some big band music in the same place where these American officers did in 1943, 1944, and 1945. Uh, it also has one of the best gift shops as well. And I'm a big connoisseur of gift shops at historic sites, and they had some great stuff. But I think the best of all, was the fact that the Officers Club bar is operational. You can get some authentic British beer when you go and visit Horham. And so there's nothing like touring a museum with a beer in hand at a wonderfully authentic and vintage place such as this. So this will definitely be a highlight of our journey. But there's a lot more in line too. We will also be visiting the Bodisham Airfield Museum, and of course, we have a iconic P-51 Mustang parked right out front. And this is another one of those very unique museums that is both a reflection on the British military experience and also what their Yank successors endured as well. Because something that is really important to remember as we visit a lot of these airfields is the fact that a lot of the infrastructure was often created by the Royal Air Force, and then the United States Army Air Forces inherited those facilities as more and more of them came in and as that friendly invasion was underway. And so this is another very unique place that will explore those dynamics as such. In my past travels, I've also had the chance to explore Bletchley Park, and in the latter phases of our trip, we will be exploring this site as well. And here I'm seen with my buddy and fellow YouTuber from World War Wisdom. And for those of you who have seen the movie The Imitation Game about famous codebreaker Alan Turing, this is the venue where that movie takes place. And it is an incredible complex of buildings. We see the original manor home right here. And it is, in essence, a memorial to the beginning of what becomes known as the computer. And you get perspective not only on Alan Turing's role in the war, but also a lot of other lesser known individuals, including Polish code breakers, who were just as instrumental to the cracking of what was thought to be the impenetrable German Enigma code machine. So we'll be having the chance to explore some intelligence, counterintelligence, subterfuge, and espionage stories as well as we take a look at all of this. And so Bletchley Park is one of those places where you could spend an entire day if you wanted to. And another thing that's really delightful about all of these places, if you're a foodie and you like a lot of good snacks along the way, all of these places have really good cafes and little restaurants and quaint little things like that, where you can get some good English tea as well. So there will be plenty of that in store as we go along too. We will be circling back to England in the final day or so of our trip, and we'll have the opportunity to visit two of my favorite places in London. And the first of which is perhaps my favorite attraction in the capital, and that is Churchill's War Rooms, which are located beneath the War Ministry buildings. And so these were impromptu shelters that were constructed below those public buildings at the outset of Britain's entry into the Second World War. And this is perhaps the most immersive environment of all. It is entirely furnished as it probably looked during the Blitz in the earliest years of the conflict. We see some very real life mannequins here on the left. And there's sound effects, and you hear phones ringing in the hallways, and there's the sound effects of bombs dropping in the streets above you. An incredible experience. And you see another photograph of one of the period furnished corridors at right. And right below that, we see another one of our destinations, which is the Imperial War Museum, one of the most venerated of historical sites that you can find in London. And over the past decade, that building has seen substantial renovation, specifically catered to the UK experience during the First World War and the Second World War. And so here too, you'll be able to gain some wonderful insight on what our allies endured during those global conflicts as well. So there's no shortage of things to see during our time in London. And when you go to visit the likes of the Imperial War Museum, something that you realize is the importance of the Battle of Britain and the Blitz to British identity. In many ways, those are the equivalent of Pearl Harbor and D-Day in the American psyche. And one reason why the Blitz is so important is because it was seen as this moment of the British people coming together, service members and civilians alike. And it was that coming together, it was that unanimity and that level of resolve that allowed them to overcome this constant bombing by the Luftwaffe at the outset of the war. And those themes, as well as those of the Battle of Britain, are very much reflected at the Battle of Britain Bunker Museum, which we've seen here. This is a very elaborate complex that is relatively new, very hands-on, a lot of interactive material, state of the art, a lot to see and do here. Once again, a meditation on what was considered to be some of the finest hours of the British people during the Second World War. So that wraps up our overview of the trip itself. If you are in fact interested and or would like to learn a little bit more about the airman experience during the Second World War, you can visit me on my YouTube channel, which is entitled Reel History. That's REEL, as in a film reel, where I analyze history versus Hollywood. And I have an episode by episode breakdown of Masters of the Air, giving additional historical context on the characters, the places, and the events depicted therein. As was mentioned during my introduction, I have also written a book that I have co-authored with a now 101-year-old World War II bomber pilot by the name of John Homan, who is soon to receive the French Legion of Honor for his heroics during World War II, and who also just happens to live in State College, Pennsylvania, only a few minutes away from our campus. And so that was one of my great honors to write a book with a World War II veteran. And that was something that I set out to do a few years ago because the time is cruel and there are fewer and fewer World War II veterans with us today, which is why I think it is important that we walk in their footsteps and learn their stories. And that's what I hope we can do in May of 2027 as we go in the footsteps of the Masters of the Air.
Dr. Frederick, we'll give you a moment or two here to catch your breath. And, as you were talking, I was off camera, though I was kind of experiencing a lot of emotions as you were talking about the places that you visited, the experiences. And we have a number of questions that we'll get to here. Again, we'll just take a moment, let you catch your breath, and we'll brag on our guest a little bit here. Dr. Frederick, two-time Penn State grad, received his bachelor's degree in 2010 from Penn State Altoona, and then last year earned his doctorate degree from Penn State Harrisburg. So a really great example of the Penn State education happening across the entire Commonwealth. This was put in the chat, but just as a quick reminder, Dr. Frederick has appeared on C-SPAN, PBS, numerous National Park Service films and documentaries. In 2019, you were a guest host on Turner Classic Movie for the channel's 25th anniversary, the Real History YouTube channel that you mentioned. So very much in your wheelhouse today in terms of discussing this topic. So let's start the Q&A with talking about the 2023 trip. Jared, you said that that might have been the most enjoyable trip or one of the most enjoyable trips you've been on. A little bit of a two-part question. One, what made that trip so enjoyable? And could you get the sense that the Penn Staters on the trip were sort of feeling a little bit of the same way and were really enjoying the trip themselves?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that made it so enjoyable was the camaraderie because we were traveling in the footsteps of the band of brothers. And by the end of the trip, we felt that we were a band of brothers and sisters. And so there was really a lot of friendships that were forged. I'm still friends with a lot of those people on Facebook. Last month, I did a Civil War tour for the Alumni Association. We visited Gettysburg and some other Civil War sites. And there were some repeat customers who were likewise on that trip from our 2023 Odyssey as well. And so I think it really spoke to the level of friendship and togetherness that is forged during these trips. One of the other things that really makes journeys like that really great is that you don't have to worry about any of the logistics. You don't have to rent a car. You don't have to worry about directions. There's a well-stocked cooler and shelf of snacks on the bus. I mean, you can sleep, if you wanted to. Get a little bit of rest and shut-eye between stops, because it's a very robust schedule that is literally a cross-country trip. So there's all of that, um, but it was really the itinerary too. Uh, it was so expansive. It was so inclusive. And something that I always try to do when I do these Penn State trips is I try to infuse a little bit of Penn State history in them as well. And so what I did on the Band of Brothers trip, for every American cemetery that we visited, I sought out Penn Staters who are buried in those cemeteries. And so that's something that I hope to do again when we visit Cambridge, because there are some Penn State alumni who never made it home who are buried there too.
Well, that sort of leads me into the next question that I had for you, Jared. You mentioned, on these visits, they can sometimes, or maybe often, they get emotional when you're talking about, the experiences and the human effort that was put toward these events. When you go on a trip like you mentioned in 2023, how does that inform your research, and does it deepen your appreciation for the resources and the human effort that was put forth? I'm wondering, how does the trip change you in a way, a little bit, it sounded like.
Really, the crux of any of these tours, and I adopt the same approach in the classroom as well, and that's really the power of place. Because for as lovely as it is that there are several dozen of us here at the moment talking about these things and all the bells and whistles that I like to put in my PowerPoints, nothing is more evocative than going and standing in those places yourself. That's why I try to do field trips every semester. This Saturday, I'm taking students on a field trip to Antietam and Harper's Ferry, two other Civil War battlegrounds. And so to be historically minded, you need to go to where history happened. And we can be well informed. We need to do research. You need to be well prepared. But there's nothing more evocative than the power of place. And I'm a firm believer in that. And that's the old park ranger in me speaking at the moment.
Well, Dr. Frederick mentioned this, the logistics, we take care of all that here at the Alumni Association. So when you travel with us, you don't have to worry about anything. You can just enjoy the trip and the experiences. Our producer, Carrie Conlon, put the link for an upcoming trip in the chat area. You can also visit our website, alumni.psu.edu/travel, for our whole list of trips. The 2027 trip that Jared mentioned, that is set for May 2027, and we'll be sharing details on that in the near future as those details become finalized. So, Jared, we've got a few questions from the audience. And so, again, if you're tuned in, you can drop your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to them here. We've got about 15 or 20 minutes. So Andrew asked, I believe he's referring to the 2027 trip, what are the odds that we meet any Masters of the Air actors?
Uh, I would say it's a possibility. I know one or two people who were in Masters of the Air. Perhaps we can recruit them into coming along with us. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, once you're on the trip, anything can happen. You meet all kinds of special guests, and you're probably going to meet other Penn Staters as well. And so, thanks, Andrew, for that question. William asked, is there a memorial or a museum for the 453rd Bomb Group near Old Buckingham?
There is a small museum at Old Buck, and there is a memorial there as well. Um, its accessibility and its hours have been sporadic in the years since COVID, and I'm not sure about its current status or its accessibility. Unfortunately, I don't believe that specific site is on the itinerary set by the National World War II Museum. But that is famously the bomber group that Pennsylvania actor Jimmy Stewart served in. And so if you're a fan of Pennsylvania's favorite actor, that's definitely a place to put on your bucket list, if at all possible. But yeah, honestly, I don't know what the status of Old Buck is, but there is a museum, and I do believe that the air control tower there still stands as well.
Well, you mentioned Jimmy Stewart from Pennsylvania. It made me, you had just mentioned the book that you co-authored with the 101-year-old World War II bomber pilot. What was your reaction when you knew that somebody, that he was living in State College, that somebody who had that experience was that close to home for you?
I jumped on it immediately. And one of the great joys, there were many joys. I mean, he's become, both of my grandfathers served in World War II, and I lost them both by the time I was 8. And I never had the chance to talk with them about their experiences. It's one of the great regrets of my life. And so he, among a select few others, have become these de facto grandfather figures in my life because I've been able to talk with them in a way that I wasn't able to do so with my own grandparents. But what makes John Homan so unique is his incredibly sharp memory, and he has all of his documentation still. He can remember the weather conditions on mission number 16 in the late fall of 1944. And so when you encounter somebody like that, who can vividly remember things that took place 81 years ago, those are the sorts of people that we historians love to seek out.
Yeah, sometimes things line up for you, and so we're glad that you were able to make that connection. Uh, we have another question. Do you think that the B-17 was a better bomber than the B-24, or were they complementary?
That is the age-old question that World War II veterans always debate amongst themselves. And I would say that they're fairly complementary or analogous to each other. They both had their strengths, they both had their strong suits. Certainly, the B-24 was not as slick or glamorous looking as the B-17 was. That's why every movie about the air war focuses on a B-17 crew. Uh, and when we think about it, the B-24 had greater range. It could carry more fuel. It could carry a bigger bomb load. And I'm speaking on behalf of John here. He said it might have been gangly looking. It might not have been quite as maneuverable as the B-17, but it got the job done. So I think that's as best way as I can answer it.
Uh, just a couple more questions here. Again, you are tuned into the virtual speaker session. We are speaking with Dr. Jared Frederick, Associate Professor of History at Penn State Altoona. This is a monthly series that connects you with our global Penn State faculty superstars who are doing research and really life-changing, groundbreaking work, not just across Pennsylvania, but really across the country and across the world. We're talking, Jared had hosted an overseas trip before for us at the Alumni Association. Another one is planned. Have a couple questions, Jared, for you personally and Penn State. You graduated from Penn State Altoona in 2010, as we mentioned, earned your PhD last year. What was it about Penn State that made you want to become a Nittany Lion growing up?
Oh boy. I would say my earliest memories of Penn State are going to basketball games at Rec Hall. So my dad had been a high school basketball coach, and going to Rec Hall before the Bryce Jordan Center was built, like those were our weekends when I was in kindergarten and first grade and second grade. Although I was sometimes terrified that I would fall through the bleachers at Rec Hall. That was kind of precarious when you're, a little fella and you're sitting there. Yeah, see, people can resonate with that in the comments there and the reactions. But it was a foregone conclusion that I was going to become a Penn Stater. It's a calling, and I suspect a lot of our viewers can empathize with all of that. But over time, uh, when you walk State College, I mean, it is just a uniquely college town, and its design, its aesthetic, it's how a college town should look and feel when you're walking through campus. And there's something very nostalgic about that. And that sort of nostalgia grows on me as I look back at our previous generations of Penn Staters, including those who fought in the Second World War, because a lot of our oldest buildings, these very hallowed halls, they were the same buildings where these people went to school 80 or 90 years ago. And so when you think of yourself as part of a continuum, as part of a long-standing and ongoing tradition, it connects you even further to those past times. And I'll give one other example too, that I often share in the classroom and that I shared on the Civil War trip. And that's the story of the 148th Pennsylvania, which is a Center County regiment that fights in the Civil War. And there were several Penn Staters in it. And that regiment fights at the Battle of Gettysburg. And so there's Penn Staters fighting at the iconic battle of the Civil War. And the same is true, too, of the major campaigns of World War II.
Yeah, Jared, you made me think of the Penn State All Sports Museum had a past exhibit of Penn Staters who had served in World War in the World Wars. This is kind of a simple question, but it's an important one. Obviously, what we're talking about, significant world events. You're talking with a 101-year-old World War II bomber pilot in State College. How important is it for us to archive these experiences and these events while, John can share those experiences and to know, you're talking about, the history and the experiences and how there's a connection from our ancestors to us today. What's the value in us recognizing and archiving and knowing that these things happened?
History is often presented as a memorization of names and dates. Unfortunately, I feel that's how it's often taught in middle school and high school. But the root sum of all good history storytelling is the story of people. Because our clothes change, our technology changes, but at the base level, people remain the same. And people who lived 80 years ago had the same aspirations that you and I do. We want to have good, comfortable lives. We want to have good jobs. We want our children and our grandchildren to have better lives than we do. These are the universal themes of humanity, and connecting with people who endured the bloodiest war in history show us not only the horror but the humanity. And so looking at these personal stories and gathering them are fundamental to understanding what that time period felt like.
No, very well said, Jared. Very well said. Have a couple more questions coming in as we're talking. For the May 2027 trip, do you anticipate any spare time during the trip, which would allow, for instance, maybe a side trip from Cambridge to Kimballton, where the 379th was stationed, bomber group was stationed?
The logistics like that tend to be beyond my control because you have to keep in mind that the National World War II Museum runs a pretty tight ship. So they stick to their itinerary, and usually there's very little room for deviation. You have to keep in mind that they've run dozens upon dozens of these tours, and they have them, um, they're well-oiled machines. These folks really know what they are doing. But all of that said, the UK, in contrast to the US, is not that big a place. And like for my British friends, a 2 hour drive for them seems like an eternity. But if you live in Pennsylvania, a 2 hour drive isn't that bad at all. So, if you are interested in exploring places that are not featured in the formal tour, uh, you can rent a car when we circle back to Heathrow International Airport and extend your trip on your own time. And so you have maximum flexibility to go see all sorts of other things, either before or after the trip. But unfortunately, I don't envision a lot of spare time to go explore on your own as the trip itself is ongoing.
All right. Again, that question was from Jeff. So, Jeff, you can still go on the tour and maybe just extend the trip a little bit, personal time, and continue to see the sights. Jared, this we had another question that kind of segues into maybe a good way to wrap this up. Someone asked the name of the book with the 101-year-old bomber. I believe that's Into the Cold Blue. But I'll give you the last word here. Maybe you can wrap up. Let folks know where they can find more information moving forward, because it sounds like, I mean, we could talk about this for quite a long time, and we want to be respectful of your time. So maybe we can just wrap up here and give folks some information about where they can find more information about this topic and what you've got out there.
You can find it Into the Cold Blue on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you are interested in a personalized copy, you can reach out to me individually via email, and I can get John to sign those copies as well. Um, you can also hear some of his interviews and some of his storytelling on my YouTube channel, Real History. Uh, yeah, beyond that, if you're interested in some additional reading on the 100th Bomb Group and the American experience on a whole in the air war, certainly you can check out Donald Miller's book, upon which this tour and the miniseries is based, Masters of the Air. A really good human perspective on the 100th Bomb Group was written by one of its chief officers named Harry Crosby. That book is entitled A Wing and a Prayer. If you want to take a step back even further, historian Gerald Astor wrote a book entitled The Mighty Eighth. And then for those Jimmy Stewart fans out there, there's an excellent book about his exploits during World War II, which is entitled Mission. And that does a wonderful job of juxtaposing his war career with his return home, culminating in the making of It's a Wonderful Life, which was his therapeutic means of getting sort of all these demons out of him when he came home from the war. And so the creation of this, what is the iconic Christmas movie, is actually a direct correlation to Jimmy Stewart's experiences during the air war and over the same places that we'll be trekking. So an interesting pop cultural note in that regard. But on the tour, I will hop in and be giving color commentary in addition to the expert guests and guides that we will have with us all throughout. And it will be my hope and intention on incorporating some Penn State history, where we can likewise learn the stories and the heroics, and sometimes, unfortunately, the sacrifices of Penn State alumni who likewise served in the mighty 8th Air Force.
So you can also visit Jared's website, jaredfrederick.com, for more information. Again, want to thank our guest today, Dr. Jared Frederick, Associate Teaching Professor of History at Penn State Altoona. I don't know if I ever knew that George Bailey, that character, was informed by Jimmy Stewart's wartime service. That was Hmm. Well, you'll definitely be hearing from me, Jared, because I want to get a copy of the book, and I would love to have John sign a copy of Into the Cold Blue. My dad, like many folks, has an appreciation for World War II, and um, while we got to have you back, Jared, because there are more questions that we want to have and more experiences. And again, May 2027, Jared will host an overseas trip. Well, we don't have the registration information available yet, but we will share that for now. We're just asking you to save the dates, May 2027. Dr. Jared Frederick, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everybody for tuning in, for producer Carrie Conlon and everyone else at the Alumni Association. Thanks for tuning in today, and thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.